So I don't really have too much for you today regarding tech and gaming news. However, there is some stories floating around the internet that I actually think are kind of interesting, so I do want to cover them in today's episode. So first off, there is some rumors and speculations of a brand new Samsung smartphone, and this brand new Samsung smartphone doesn't actually look like a premium smartphone or a flagship from Samsung. It actually looks like one of their lower end phones. If you're unfamiliar with Samsung and you really don't pay attention to the market, Samsung does make a couple of mid tier smartphones. They don't always necessarily try to cater to the upper end when it comes to Samsung smartphones. I don't think they're very easy to get here in America, at least. That's probably why you've probably never seen much of these in America, because most people don't find a way to get their hands on these. Usually these are for other markets outside of the US that are trying to cater to a different market, like I said. But let's go ahead and talk about the leaks and talk about the rumors of this upcoming Samsung smartphone. So you can see the title of the article says, Samsung is reportedly working on a phone with a pop-up camera. And honestly, I have some thoughts about this because I actually think this is very interesting in a number of different ways. First of all, this is not the first company that's ever tried a pop-up camera on their phone. There's been a couple of different manufacturers to actually try this idea. The one that comes to mind for me is going to be OnePlus. OnePlus did it with the OnePlus 7 Pro last year. And I honestly thought it was actually a very good idea. Now, hear me out. I know a lot of people have a lot of different feelings about these pop-up cameras and about moving parts and things. Of course, when it comes to smartphones or when it comes to gadgets in general, anything with a moving part is not too good, just because it can't last as long as something that's not moving. Because of course, anytime you want to use it, you have a motor that's going up and down, and the longevity of the motor could actually break in the long run. But just like most things, it should last as long as you keep your smartphone. Most of these pop-up cameras are rated to last for an extremely long time, and in most cases, most likely that'll outlast the time of you actually owning the smartphone, so it's not that big a deal. But I can see a lot of people out there really complaining about this because, like I said, moving parts is still one more thing that can go wrong with your smartphone. So I understand from a consumer aspect and a consumer standpoint why people would not want these cameras. But on another hand, they're actually quite useful, because that means you do get a full front display on your actual smartphone. No longer do you have something like a cutout or a punch out on the actual screen for your camera, so you do get a better experience when it actually comes to more screen real estate, and there's nothing really on the screen to actually bother your experience, and it's not as distracting. And then of course, the biggest reason why a pop-up camera is actually really good is the fact that the camera is inside the body of the smartphone, and since the camera is inside of the body of the smartphone, of course, that does mean your privacy is less likely to be breached, just because, well, when a hacker gets a hold of your smartphone's camera, what can they really do? They can't really do anything, because 99% of the time your smartphone's camera is going to be inside the body of the phone, so they can't really spy on you. They can't really do anything malicious, so that's nice. And on top of that, you don't have to worry about your camera actually getting dirty, because of course most of the time you're just going to use it to like take whatever you need to take, put it back in the phone, and less likely of the actual the lens itself getting like dirty or damaged by something, because like I said again, it's inside the actual body of the actual phone. Now you can see from this design and this picture right here, if we open up the picture of this supposedly leaked Samsung smartphone, it kind of looks like a budget smartphone to me personally. You can see the design's a little bit different, the camera layout's different, the screen to body ratio on the front of the device doesn't really look all that good. It kind of looks like a budget smartphone to me. Again, these are all rumors and speculations. Would Samsung actually do something like this? Yes, of course, it's possible. And time again, most of these rumors and leaks that actually do come out are not just like faked up or mocked up. Most of the time, they're inside information from like a factory that gets leaked, and most of the time, most of these are real. So you can still take this as a grain of salt, but in general, it's just a very interesting. It's hard to say, would this be a flagship or would this not be a flagship? Honestly, with other rumors floating around about Samsung's next flagship, the Samsung Galaxy S21. Honestly, I think this is not going to be a flagship just because apparently there's other rumors floating around about the Samsung Galaxy S21 that, of course, is coming out next year. And apparently that one's going to have the camera under the display, so you can't actually see the camera. It'll be under the display and it'll still be on the front of the device, so it won't actually have a moving camera. So I probably believe that because that there's been a company in China for like a couple years now that's been developing this technology that actually allows the cameras to be on the display, but they're under the display, kind of like if you ever used a smartphone with a fingerprint sensor that's actually under the display, like the Samsung Galaxy S10 and S20 line and some other smartphones. That's already a thing. So yes, most likely they wouldn't want to go to a design or a camera pop out like this for a flagship just because it's one more moving part and it's not really futuristic. The future would be to have the camera under the display, so it'll just be under there when you want to use it. Just press a button and then you can use it easily. This just and the fact from this picture alone, like I said, the screen to body ratio is really the big thing that really doesn't make this thing look like a flagship in my eyes. It really looks like it could be a budget friendly option with a pop out camera, but who really knows? But either way, it's just new news. It looks like this one could boost whatever this is, since they don't really know what this Samsung Galaxy is going to be, or they say actually it's going to be the Samsung Galaxy A series, which the A series is actually a phone from Samsung. It's just not really accessible in America. It's always for other markets, of course, and I do believe, like I said again, this is a budget-friendly Samsung Galaxy device, which is very interesting. It's actually very interesting to me if this thing comes out. It's funny that the actual flagships from Samsung, like the Samsung Galaxy S10s and the Samsung Galaxy S20 line, for instance, doesn't even have a camera that's actually hidden, and it actually has a punch out on the front of the device, and that's actually very interesting just because it's funny that the budget friendly option from Samsung would actually have a camera that's not actually bothering you. It's actually a camera you wouldn't even see all the time, so that's actually funny. But again, they're probably saving that under the screen camera technology for next year's Samsung Galaxy S21 line, of course, and that probably makes a whole lot of sense. And then the last one actually for today's episode is actually going to be more about the iPhone SE2 or the iPhone SE 2020 that literally just came out. And I wanted to show you some pictures here of the iPhone SE 2020 or SE2 because there is a very interesting story to be told about this smartphone alone. So if you look at this smartphone, of course, the design of this smartphone is actually based off of the iPhone 8. But when somebody actually tear down the iPhone SE2, what we actually discovered is more of the phone is actually really similar to the iPhone 8. But again, it should be no surprise to people just because they're using the same body design. They're also using the same, like I said, the same design. So it makes sense the inside of this phone would be extremely similar to something like the iPhone 8. And when they tore it down, a lot of the phone was actually based around the iPhone 8. Basically, all that Apple really did with this phone is they pretty much took parts laying around their factory, and all they really did is just pretty much take like an iPhone 8, cracked it open, did some modifications here or there, and then pretty much sold it as the iPhone SE2. But of course, that does make sense when you're trying to make a phone as cheap as something like the iPhone SE2 or even the original iPhone SE that was based off of the iPhone 5's design originally. It makes sense that you want to try to cut as many corners as possible to make sure that this phone is going to be as cheap as possible. And to get a phone down to the price point this is being sold at, I think $399 is extremely cheap, and I can see why so many corners have actually been cut when it comes to this smartphone alone. And it does make sense that they would just want to rehash something that's already in their factory, because they don't have to make new parts for it. They don't have to go do anything. Basically, they just have to take old parts that have been laying around for quite some time and pretty much just do a little tweaking here or there and then pretty much call it a day. Of course, the biggest thing from these two smartphones alone is if you compare the iPhone 8 versus the iPhone SE2, is going to be, of course, that brand new that brand new processor, the A13. But again, it's not really going to cost them anything because they're taking parts from the iPhone like 11s and then the iPhone 8s and then things like that, and then pretty much just mashing them together. But it is pretty much interesting that when you look at this thing, the more you look at it, the more it's really just, you're still really just paying for an updated version of the iPhone 8, just with pretty much a better processor. So overall, is it a better phone? Yes, it's a better phone than the iPhone 8, 100%, just because you are getting better processing power. You're getting the A13 instead of whatever the iPhone 8 was actually using, which is interesting. What I really hope happens in the near future, because there is actually another rumor I want to talk about that I don't actually have pulled up here, which maybe I should have pulled up, but basically there's a rumor about a brand new iPad, more so the iPad Air 4. So you guys know right now there are three different SKUs of the iPad, or four. We have the iPad budget model, which is the iPad 7th generation, which is the budget-friendly iPad. We do have the next step up, which is the iPad Air 2019, or iPad Air 3, and then of course we do have the brand new iPad Pros 2020. So basically there's a new rumor floating around about a brand new iPad Air. Who knows if those rumors are true or not, but basically what the rumors speculate is the iPad Air 4, yes, the iPad Air 4 for 2021. I think that's specifically what the rumor said. It supposedly said that smartphone, that tablet alone was supposed to be getting a bigger screen. It's supposed to be going to 11 inches from the iPad Air 3s from 2019 that they currently still sell today, which only has a 10.5 inch screen. But the biggest key difference between all the other iPads is the fact that it's supposed to share the same design as something like the iPad Pros from 2018 and 2020, which is actually very interesting. So the screen to body ratio is supposed to be extremely good. No more will you get big thick bezels, and apparently you're supposed to get no home button as well with that device, and that would actually be super amazing, just because if you look at what Samsung is doing over on their tablet side, they are doing something kind of similar to what Apple may be doing in the near future. Basically, you guys know or not know that Samsung does have a Samsung Galaxy S6 tablet, which I think came out last year or the year before, and basically what they did is they made a light version of that, but instead of just making it a different version that's kind of like uglier, they pretty much just kept the actual same design as the Samsung Galaxy S6, which is Samsung Galaxy Tab S6, which is pretty much their flagship tablet currently. That's actually pretty amazing that it shares the same body, so it doesn't really feel like you're getting a downgrade when it actually comes to the actual device when you're buying the light version. And the reason I actually brought up the iPad Air 4 rumors is the fact that I really wish Apple would actually take one of the designs from one of the current iPhones, like maybe the iPhone 10 line, take cues from the iPhone 10 line, shrink that down, and then somehow have a small phone that looks like an iPhone 10. I know the reason why Apple wouldn't do that, because they want to give some incentive and give some reason for people to actually upgrade to something like the iPhone 11s, the iPhone 10s, the iPhone 10s, because those ones look more modern, just because you have better screen to body ratio and things like that. And I'm not really too mad about it. I understand at this price point they couldn't get something with a better screen to body ratio. They wanted to cut corners as much as possible, and like I said, they wanted to give you reasons not to buy it as well by making it still look ugly and still having those big bezels. And I know a lot of people just don't care about it, because if you're looking at a phone that's only $399, most likely you're probably not going to care about a lot of these premium features that are on a lot of these flagship smartphones from Samsung, from Apple, and things like that. But again, it would be cool maybe in like 3, 4, or 5 years if they ever want to do like an iPhone SE3. I would hope they would take a brand new design and have less bezels, because this is the second time that they took in one of the older iPhone's designs, the iPhone 5's design or the iPhone 8's design, and honestly, they don't really age all too well. But again, like I said so many times, it doesn't matter because most consumers who are buying this at this price point honestly do not care about that, and it is good. And I can't blame Apple for doing it, but it would be cool even if they had to raise the price a little bit, maybe to like $500 to get the design that I would actually want, like the iPhone X's design for a budget smartphone. I don't think $500 or $500 would even be asking all too much, especially if they can get that body design of the iPhone X into a smaller package. That would actually be pretty awesome, and I can't wait to actually see that. And talking about the iPhone SE2 just a little bit longer, since now I'm on the topic of the SE2, I'm actually really glad that Apple actually finally unveiled this phone to everybody. I think it was time that Apple finally got rid of the iPhone SE1. That thing is pretty old at this point, so it's nice that they updated the SE line to the SE2, and I think it really hits the sweet spot for a lot of consumers looking just for a phone. And most people at this price point don't care about anything. They just want a good usable phone that'll last for a long time. And with iPhones definitely last a long time, and they actually last longer than a lot of other Android devices just because you get updates all the time, and you get updates for about 4 to 5 years. Unlike most Android phones on the market, most Android phones only get like 1 or 2 updates, and you're pretty much out of luck. So if you want one of the best overall cheapest phones on the market, the iPhone SE2 is definitely going to be that, and there's nothing to really complain about this phone. This phone is definitely worth it at the price point if you just need a good working smartphone where you can still do stuff and things like that. Overall, it is a pretty good value for what you're getting for. And that's pretty much going to wrap up this episode. Anyway, guys, this is Wayne from My Tech News, signing out.